Good evening, everyone. My name is Universal Monsters,
And I am Frankenmatt.
and welcome back to the Comics and Cinema Club, where today we're going to be talking about one of horror's greatest creators and just an overall great movie director as well, a guy I really like, John Carpenter, who's fantastic at what he does and has a really unique style of filmmaking, but it's largely rooted in horror.
Yes, while he may have had some major successes in other genres, such as some of his biggest hits, "Assault on Precinct 13," "Big Trouble in Little China," and uh, the "Escape from New York" series. What makes John Carpenter so fun is some of his scary movies,
Oh,
because
yeah.
while he uh, is good in those. It's a spooky season. We want to have fun with one of our favorite spooky directors, and John Carpenter is definitely one of our favorite spooky directors. So, Drew will definitely be taking the lead. He's probably seen more of Carpenter's films than I have, but some of those make up, two of those specifically make up Drew's favorite uh, scary movies. So, we'll definitely be getting into those because I love those
Yeah.
movies too. But
I'm pretty sure I've
to
mentioned at least The Thing before. I freaking love The Thing, and it's one of my favorite horror movies. But it's really interesting the story behind it as well, and like how it's kind of become influenced. Like a lot of filmmakers really love The Thing and how it's done and everything. Carpenter has really left his mark on horror movies. Like we were debating, do we do Wes Craven? Do we do John Carpenter? Do we even do Sam Raimi? And we were kind of like, we'll just save them and we'll talk about Carpenter because he truly is a horror movie genius. Um, but for starters, like John Carpenter really got his start in the 1970s with a movie called Dark Star. And it was a science fiction comedy that was his first real big breakout that he did uh, with a very small cast. And it seems like it was his directorial debut. And also, something to note about Carpenter, he scores a lot of his films. A lot of his
Mhm.
movies, he will end up scoring and do the theme song for. So for something like Halloween, he did the score for that. Like he went all out with it, and like he came up with that for it for the original score and everything. There, he is credited as I believe being the composer on it. But he started with Dark Star, and then after that, he did a movie called Assault on Precinct 13, which really got him into the limelight and really got him out there. Assault on Precinct 13, I still need to see it. I still really want to see it. He wrote and directed it, and it was basically a film about. A, I haven't seen it, so I'm just reading off the Wikipedia. Sorry. It's about a police officer who defends a defunct precinct against a relentless crime gang, and has to rely on a death row convict who assists him in the process. And it had a pretty small cast; it didn't have anyone super well known. It looks like in it, but it really set him on the map and put him on the right path moving forward. And then, of course, after that, 2 years later, in 1978, he did a little movie that I think Matt and I can both have a few things to talk about: Halloween.
Yes, and it definitely makes sense that that's a sort of start that Carpenter had because Carpenter's been very vocal throughout his career about his love for low budget horror and high budget horror. Because a lot of the movies that inspired him and during his original days, after, fun fact, he actually dropped out of school. He didn't really have a desire for film
Mhm.
to study filmmaking.
Yeah.
He just sort of wanted to do things his own way. But he was definitely inspired by films with a low budget, like Thing from Another World, which he in turn would remake later on,
Oh yeah.
uh, and of course high budget sci-fi series movies such as Godzilla and The Forbidden Planet, both of which are excellent choices. He's got very good taste, clearly. But
Mhm.
his career and his films have often been characterized by very very much minimalist aesthetics. They're sort of very aware of the kind of budget that they have. So, uh, with that in mind, it's he utilizes a lot of a simple effects. You know what I mean? Something that it could be attributed to a B movie almost, but it's not. They're not B movies. He doesn't really do those. He
Mm.
has a whole lot of panoramic shots. He has minimalist lighting and photography. He uses steady cams. He, as Drew mentioned, he scores most of his own movies because he probably couldn't afford like a big music producer. And
Mhm.
even if he could, he probably wouldn't even want to. It sort of ruins the effect of his aesthetic. And not to mention, he has a lot of widescreen shot compositions, panoramic, anamorphic cinematography.
Hmm.
A lot of his some of his movies were even shot with Super 35. You know, it was like he feels the 30. I'm reading from his Wikipedia page right here. He has stated that he feels the 35 millimeter Panavision blah 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 format is the best movie system there is, and he prefers it to both digital filming and 3D, which probably explains why he hasn't done a whole lot uh, of modern films with digital and 3D technology because it just doesn't feel the same to him. That's the thing that makes Carpenter stand out. He's a very, very humble, very much set in his ways kind of person, but he's
Yeah.
very modest about it. You know, he's not like rubbing it in anybody's face that he thinks he's better than them. He's actually
No.
spoken out against horror directors for being uppity and looking down their nose at people when they're he's just happy to be here, you know?
I think one of my favorite things about John Carpenter is that this man he's up there in age. Like he's an older guy now. He's around, oh my god, Wikipedia, work with it. He's 76, so he's not that old, but he's 76 years old. And he's just this old guy now playing video games and having a good time. That's kind of it. Like he just kind of became interested in movies by literally watching The Thing from Another World and stuff like Godzilla. Like he got into it because he was a nerd and he liked it and he thought it was cool. And, it kind of proves you don't need a fancy, major to really or degree to do anything with it, and he kind of goes all out with it. One of my favorite things recently too is, for those who don't know, Megalopolis came out a little while ago,
Hey.
and Francis Ford Coppola on Letterboxd gave it a 5 out of 5. He gave his own film a 5 out of 5. He just kind of was like, I thought I did a good job, but then there was a Twitter post where John Carpenter was like, "What the fuck is a letterboxed?" And it just like I just love John Carpenter for that. I love the guy because I've never met him, but he definitely seems like a down to earth kind of person who just is doing his own thing, and it kind of shows with his style. So we're definitely going to talk more about Halloween at a later date. But then after Halloween, 1978, like that was probably one of his biggest successes because it was so simple, because it was so easy to do. It only had a budget of like $300,000, give or take, and it made back on it was 70 million. So
Hmm.
on top of that, he then went on to do another horror movie, The Fog, with Jamie Lee Curtis, also in the role of that as well. And he also had some recurring people who would return for movies and stuff. Uh, I'm gonna butcher this name. Adriana Barbia was one of the actresses who would return. She was in Halloween as well, and she came back for The Fog. And then after The Fog in 1981, he had a whole string of movies. He did like he that's another thing. He was pumping movies out for a while in the 80s. 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, like bam, 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 all back to back. And then in 88, 81, he released Escape from New York. And the other thing too, and I keep bouncing back and forth, but he had a very unique style where he wasn't pinned down in just one theme or one genre. He went from doing like sci-fi thriller to a thriller to two horror movies, and then he bounced back to like a dystopian, you know, a dystopian thriller with Escape from New York, which basically is set in a futuristic New York that is in ruins, is in shambles, and it stars John Carpenter, Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Boner, Donald Pleasance, a lot of people who again collaborated with him on other projects. And it basically was, believe it or not, Snake Plissken running around New York City and doing a whole bunch of stuff and trying his best to get back these he was a criminal or a former soldier who became a criminal, and he's running around trying to find a cassette tape in order to really like prove this, get a president back. And the tape has really important information on it that the president is going to be playing at a peace speech. And I think that Escape from New York and Halloween have something that I really like about Carpenter. He has fantastic endings,
He
because
does.
Escape from New York, like Halloween and like The Thing, have very dark endings. Escape from New York literally ends with Snake having the cassette tape, giving it to the president. It's meant to solve world peace, it's meant to do a whole lot of things, but the president is kind of a dick. He basically is telling Snake, like, all the people who helped save him, he's like, I don't really care about them. I don't, they said they helped me. I appreciate that. And
How
Snake's like,
shocking.
you're a fucking asshole. So he gives him the cassette tape. He walks away. He has his immunity. He's leaving. President plays the cassette tape. It's a recording of songs from one of the characters Snake met along the way. And as Snake is walking away a free man, he destroys the piece cassette tape.
Hmm.
and that's the end of the movie. It leaves it in a very sort of ambiguous ending until, of course, we got a sequel because it needed a sequel, I guess. But that just kind of speaks to Carpenter and to like how he's able to do these kind of movies, and he also has an idea for like scale and for visual effects and everything with that as well. Um, and then, of course, after that in 81, in 1982, you had, like I've said, my favorite movie, The Thing. I freaking loved The Thing because it was such a good movie. It was very well done, it was very well executed. Here's the thing about The Thing: when it came out, it was not well received. It was actually received negatively, and a lot of critics kind of called it instant junk and a wretched excess. It grossed 19.9 million on a budget of 15 million, and it didn't do great. And I think the main problem with that is because that same year ET came out.
Yeah, that it
So,
really wasn't. It was not a good time for it. Alien
no.
movies, ET took the world by storm, and it was people wanted more like heartfelt stuff, and the thing probably he should have waited a little while to release it, given that kind of competition. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
But the great thing about the thing is that it found life on home video and television. And then in years people have reviewed it and looked back at it again and realized this is actually a great movie. It is. It's truly a really well done and fantastic film that really stands out. And the reason
And
why is because, and this is something that gets me with a lot of horror movies, and this is one of the reasons why I really love Carpenter. He gets suspense. He gets tension.
he does.
Nowadays, with a lot of horror movies, you shove jump scares in people's faces and you say, "Oh, that's scary, guys. That's spooky. That's scary, right?" Whereas with Carpenter, one of my favorite things about the thing is that it builds up this feeling of suspense. You legitimately don't know who the thing is. You legitimately don't know who it could be, and it's great because there's no real hints, there's no real obviousness about it. All of a sudden, that person is the thing. And something else I love about it too, they make human mistakes. A lot of times in horror
Hmm.
movies, people make really dumb mistakes. I'll even say Halloween. Halloween, people were like, I'm going to get horny and leave the door unlocked. But even in that movie, like, we'll talk about that another time. But when the mistakes happened, they were kind of realistic. And the thing, what made it so great is that when a mistake happened, like, I'm assuming everyone who's listening to this has seen the thing. If you haven't, spoiler alert. There's a scene where they're trying to figure out who the thing is, and McReady, Kurt Russell's character, has broken back into the Outpost 31 station, and one of the guys is very adamant, we can't let him in, we got to stop him, and he tries to make a move on McReady to kill him, and McReady shoots him and kills him. And McReady's insistent, I'm going to prove to you who's the thing. And there's this great scene with the blood test where everyone drops a little bit of blood into a container. And I said this in our Halloween question video. I have those blood containers on my desk, like replicas of them, and I love them. But everyone puts blood into containers. He takes hot wire and he starts to test. He tests his blood. There's nothing. Then he goes to the guy that he shot, and he's insistent that he's the thing. Nothing happens with the blood, and it proves that like he wasn't the thing. They just made a legitimate mistake. They didn't know who to trust. They were legitimately afraid. And that is what makes it such a good movie and why Carpenter was so good with it and why it really stands out as being such a good film. I do have kind of a funny story to share about this, though. If you love dogs, do not watch this movie. I ended up showing this movie to my sister, and I mentioned briefly that something happens to the dogs. I did
He he
not
he
tell her
he
that
he.
several dogs get brutally murdered, and that was a mistake. But that's another thing that works is that you think it's a dog, but it ain't a dog, baby. Plus, there's some really good lines. Again, like I love the ending of this movie. I know I'm overshadowing Matt in some of this, but I love this. The ending of this movie is one of my favorite film endings of all time because it's so bleak, and you legitimately don't know who the thing is. It could be McReady, it could be Childs, it could be neither of them, it could be both of them for all we know. But it's so great just seeing them sit there, and I actually have an old calendar. I had a film calendar from a while back, and I kept a couple. I have two up there, two from two amazing movies, and one is from The Thing, and it is why don't we just wait here a little while, see what happens, and it just ends with that, with them drinking and the ominous score playing in the background that was scored by the great Ennio Morricone. And then the other great quote that I have, the fantastic quote, is "Woman, where is my super suit?" But I
Wait.
digress on that. But The Thing, probably one of Carpenter's greatest films, in my opinion.
And it's definitely a good choice out there. I mean, it's such a well done movie in so many aspects. I would swear that Cronenberg had a huge involvement given the film's effects, which people called repulsive, but hey, that's kind of the point. You know, it's a
Mhm.
thing from another world. It's not supposed to be pleasant like an ape with a weird helmet on its head, you know?
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
it definitely feels like a remake that sort of surpasses the original. But
Mhm.
I know some people say you can't beat the classics. You can with some things. So there's definitely that. And following that, he had uh, a couple other big hits, such as Christine and Big Trouble in Little China. You know, Christine works as a scary film. It's a Stephen King scary film, so you know a lot of shit's probably not going to make sense. But it's very fun. It works within the certain restraints that Carpenter likes to keep himself in. Like it doesn't have that big a budget. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
car. You know, the most you're going to need is like the effects needed to show it reconstructing itself. But it's still so well made, so fun. And then, of course, Big Trouble in Little China, which introduced the fun character of Lopan, the ancient Chinese sorcerer who lives beneath Chinatown, who had the great honor of being mentioned in the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny song, which in turn got it into the Hall of Fame for me.
I think we
I'm
need to
just kidding.
mention Big Trouble in Little China is not, it's not great if you look at it from nowadays. Like, there's some things about it that are not really good, but like from like a political correctness standpoint. Um,
Yeah.
but James Hong did a great job as the villain. Kurt Russell did a great job, and there's some really cheesy, stupid, fun moments to it that really help it stand out. They want to remake it with The Rock, and honestly, that'd be kind of dumb.
And
But
not to mention the fact that it's a Fox movie. It's honestly one of the only movies that Carpenter has made with the big studio because uh, unfortunate fact. Production and reception to this movie left Carpenter extremely disillusioned with Hollywood as a
yeah,
concept. So it influenced a big decision of his to return to independent filmmaking.
yeah,
So while the movie itself is a cult classic, it probably is one of the few times that you're going to see his name attached to like a big Hollywood production,
yeah,
especially from this moment on. Because after this, he followed up with movies like Prince of Darkness, They Live, Memoirs of an Invisible Man, In the Mouth of Madness, Village of the Damned, another book adaptation, which is definitely fun and proves why children should not be trusted. Isn't that right, Damien?
yeah.
And then, of
Going,
course, Escape from LA, Vampires, Ghost of Mars. His most recent film was in 2010 called The
yeah.
Ward, which I think might be his last one because, as Drew's mentioned, he's up there in years and there's only so much you can do at a certain point. So,
I will say though he does have a video game he's actually making that's on the way. And that speaks to like how much
well,
he
that's
likes
fun.
video games and everything. It's called Toxic. It's not Toxic Avenger. Hold on. I was about to say
Fun fact.
Toxic Avenger, and that would have been something way different. I think it's what is it? I'm finding it.
While he's looking that up, fun fact for you. Apparently, he really loves Sonic. So, could you imagine if he did the Sonic movie? Because I
Good
guarantee you,
God.
Ugly Sonic could have been way uglier if that was the case.
Oh my god, just imagine like Sonic's head rolling off of his body and it like grows legs like in the thing and it goes like just gets up. That's another thing about the thing. Is like the visual effects and that the costume and the makeup was so good. It was so amazing and they did a great job. We need to just do I'm just gonna need to find like a day where I can just record a whole episode by myself about the thing, Matt. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you out with that. Um but John Carpenter's Toxic Commando is actually set to come out this year. Perhaps it might get delayed, but he is also still scoring, and he still has some stuff on the way as well. With that, he is scoring alongside his son, David Carpenter, and they actually
hmm
released something called Lost Themes on Spotify Noir, which I listened to a few songs on there. It's pretty good. He also scored the 2018 Halloween film,
Yes,
and he
he was
also
an executive
scored,
producer there too.
yeah, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends as well. And he also helped score Firestarter, which was another Stephen King novel adaptation that came out in 2022.
Didn't he?
Um,
Did make
but
that film good though.
yeah, I do want to go back real quick and talk about a Carpenter film that Matt kind of glossed over. They Live.
Go ahead.
They Live. It's not necessarily horror, but there's horror like aspects and thriller aspects to it, and it's actually a really well done movie. it speaks like there's great talks on it about consumerism and about like subliminal messages, and it basically is about Rowdy Piper running around with sunglasses that allow him to see that there are actually like aliens living among them that have like certain signs and messages implanted into like TVs and products to just consume, 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 and it just works as a movie. It's actually pretty well done and has a good cult following. There's a scene in there that's considered to be like Carpenter claimed that it was going to be one of the greatest fight scenes ever made, and it is a pretty good fight scene. It is very well done. It's just kind of like all over the place and a little chaotic, but it fits with that. The other thing too is Keith David's the name. Keith David is fantastic as well. I also do want to point out it has probably one of the more iconic lines in film history, or a iconic line. I've come here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of
And I'm all
bubblegum.
out of bubble gum. You'll notice a recurring trend with a lot of the movies that were, especially the ones we're talking about. They may not have been major successes at the time, but they quickly grew cult following on home video,
Yeah,
which I makes me wonder if he might not have been as successful with critics, but it makes me wonder if Carpenter was very much ahead of the times, as a with culture as a whole. You know,
yeah,
because it makes me wonder, given how critics with critics now respond to his films and hold them up with such regard, uh, on the same level that their fans do, prop them up over the years and made them cult status films. It makes me wonder if Carpenter would be a lot more successful if he was a modern day director. And
yeah,
even then, I probably wouldn't say so because, as mentioned, he loves to work within a specific budget or time frame, and loves to work with 35 millimeter film, and he doesn't really care about digital filmmaking that much. So I definitely
yeah,
think uh, he came at an interesting time, a time that where a lot of critics and a lot of things seem to work against him, but the culture definitely supported him and his style of filmmaking, and definitely led to a legacy that he has now. So I find it very fascinating to think about that sort of thing.
yeah. It definitely speaks that Carpenter he had a style and he had a really interesting usage of, like we said, genres and sort of filmmaking. Like again, he did a whole slew of horror movies. He did like The Thing, he did Christine, and then in between that, in 1984, he did Starman, which was like a science fiction romantic drama that earned Jeff Bridges an Oscar nomination. And then he did Big Trouble in Prince. Like he was very unique in what he did and what he does do with horror movies and with movies in general and with filmmaking. And it does feel like that, like Matt said, was right. He was ahead of his time. He had an idea of what he wanted to do, and he just went for it. And I definitely think that without John Carpenter, there definitely wouldn't have been a lot of great influence in Hollywood now. Horror, like if I'm being honest, we probably wouldn't have gotten Friday the 13th if it was not for Halloween
We
or any of
probably
those
wouldn't have.
movies. Slasher films probably would not have been as big as they are now.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about this when we review Halloween proper, but Halloween, granted, slasher films had been around before. Like we
Yes.
had Texas Chainsaw Massacre like for a few years beforehand, but Halloween set a whole lot of tropes and standards, and it sort of set the stage for what would make a slasher film.
Yeah.
And the brand as a whole, or the concept of slasher films as a whole, do owe a lot to not only Hammer Horror and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but they also owe a lot to Halloween because it shows
Yeah.
what they can do with simple budgets, simple ideas for characters, and overall just a simple aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, what's always fun to me about Halloween is that, slasher films like Matt has said have been around for a while. Like Psycho was one of the first slasher films ever made, and then it was
Yep.
followed by like Black Christmas, I think, or something along those lines, and then
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw as well. What's fun though about Psycho, which is considered to be the start of that, Janet Leigh played the main scream girl in that, the girl who gets killed right off the bat. Her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, ended up being Laurie in Halloween. So it's really
Huh.
cool seeing how that really worked and how it like transferred down and everything. I've always liked that. I've always loved that fact.
Did not know that. And not to mention, we can sit here and praise his filmmaking until we're blue in the face, but we also should mention that since we are the Comics and Cinema Club, with his wife, he actually founded his own comic book publishing company, Storm King Comics.
I did
You
not know
know,
that.
with yes, his wife Sandy King. given that Storm King, Sandy King.
Mm,
uh, they
that's
focus on
pretty cool.
bringing the bring they f- according to their website, they focus on bringing the best writers from the worlds of comics, movies, and novels to their special brand of horror and sci-fi entertainment and comics. And I don't know a whole lot of I haven't read a whole lot of their published materials, but some of recent editions are Dark and Twisted, Night Terrors, and
Mhm.
Storm Kids. So they definitely have an audience for them, and they're still going to this day. So I definitely think that's very interesting as well. And it makes sense, honest to God, because while he's certainly left a major impact on filmmaking as a whole, especially for the the horror genre, the thriller genre, and the action genres in a lot of ways, it's still interesting to see how his style can influence other things and other forms of media. So good on him for Storm King Comics, and I hope he and his wife are doing very well, and that they are able to continue making books for years to come. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. And it's
And
just cool. Good.
one last fun fact. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one last
No,
fun fact. His wife, Sandy King, is actually the first woman founder of an entire comic publishing house.
that's
She is
really
the
cool.
first. She's actually a very big trailblazer right there. So good on her.
Um, 1 second. Actually, curious.
Some other titles from that brand include the award-winning Asylum series,
Oh.
for a Halloween Night anthologies, and John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction, and the new title Night Terrors.
Hmm. I mean, it's just kind of cool that he has that. I also like there is a thing comic that is not bad. It does kind of over explain things, so I'm not like the biggest fan of it. It kind of like goes really in depth, and it's like, oh hey, it could have been McReady. It could have been Childs. It was Childs, actually. I don't think he was actually involved with that, but that's just something to point out. I also will
Yeah,
say Carpenter has actually gotten in and written comics before, too. Beyond that, he did a Joker comic not too
he
long
did.
ago, like a one shot in 2019, 2020, when they did a whole year of the villain kind of thing. But it was really fun to see him come in and write a character like that and try for a sort of horror aspect with it. But yeah,
It's very interesting. So I I I can talk so much again about all of his favorite movies, but again, I want to save Halloween and a whole lot of aspects around it for when we review it proper. So for now, all I'll say is John Carpenter, if you're listening to us at all, because I don't know if he has time to listen to a podcast or even if he
probably
knows what a
not.
podcast is, but
What the fuck
uh,
is a podcast?
yeah, if this makes its way to you, thank you for all the work that you have done, and we look forward to seeing what you are able to bring in the future with both with your video game and with Storm King Comics. And thank you for creating so many movies that mean so much to us from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very, very much for your impact on the world of cinema.
Mhm. Thank you so much for everything that you've done and for creating some of the greatest horror movies and some of the greatest sci-fi films and post-apocalypse and just creating a lot of films that have left a huge impact on society and filmmaking, not maybe society, but filmmaking as a whole, because it truly means a lot to all of us.
And with that, I think Drew and I should just sit here a while, see what happens.
Matt, where is your head going?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about
Pass the whiskey, man.
it.
All right. Well, we're just gonna sit here by the burning husk of Outpost 31. Hey, look, a husky. And we're just
Puppy!
gonna chill out, everybody. But until next time, we'll see you later. And you don't know who to trust at this point, do you? And join us next time because next time, like we kind of alluded to in this, we got a very good Halloween, truly Halloween episode planned for you. All right. Was that's Friday the 13th? What? Okay. We'll see you guys later. Have a good day. Bye.